Welcome to the Get Real Podcast, your high-octane boost of full-on reality therapy for personal, business, and investing success with your host, Ron Phillips, because somebody's got to tell it like it is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Get Real Podcast. Ron Phillips here. I got a question about the difference between single family and smaller multifamily, like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, stuff like that. They wanted to know what the pros and cons are to each one, why you would want to buy one over the other. So I figured I'd just take a shot at that today and let everybody know what my feeling is on all of the above. I have owned all of them. We obviously sell all of them, and they're all great for their own reasons. So let's dive into it real quick. And I don't know about anybody else, but 2025 just feels good. 2024 didn't feel very good. It's like almost like the economy just stopped. I know it didn't, but that's kind of what it felt like. And 2025 feels like the economy is kind of opening back up, like a engine somebody just slammed the gas on. But we'll see. Who knows what happens? Let's talk about a few differences. I want to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. Occasionally, somebody asks about a 5-plex, a 6-plex, an 8-plex. Those are really, you would classify those as smaller properties. And sometimes a 6-plex can cost less than a 4-plex, depending on if it's new construction, the size. And I just want to make everybody super clear on one thing. For loan purposes, residential investment loans are 4 units or less. So it doesn't make any difference if a 5-plex is less expensive than the 4-plex. A 5-plex is a commercial loan. And it gets really, really tricky. Commercial loans that are not very big commercial loans, because the loan products for those, you're pretty much relegated to local banks. There aren't very many loan products out there for smaller, less expensive commercial investment properties. So anytime we're dealing with contractors who are building townhomes and they have some 5 and 6 unit buildings, 4s, 3s, 2s, just kind of sprinkled around, our advice to them is always try to make them all 4s, 3s, and 2s, because if you do that, people can buy them as a building. So little hot take for you: if you're doing turnkey construction and you want to sell them to individual buyers instead of a hedge fund, then you really need to think that through. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about on this show is 4 units and under. So the difference between single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, that's really what we're going to talk about. Everything else is a commercial loan, which means it has completely different rules, completely different loans. And because of that, it has different pros and cons. And I can tell you, like a 5-plex, the big con to that is that you're dealing with a local bank. Right now, that money is very expensive. Money for residential is much, much cheaper. So there's one big con to those smaller commercial properties. That doesn't mean they're not good. It just means that you got to work harder at it. Okay, so what's the difference between a single family and a duplex through fourplex? And I'm going to group all of those together for this episode. We're going to call those multifamily, even though I just told you these are really small residential loans, right? Not a multifamily loan. It's a residential loan. Okay. It's not a commercial loan, but that's what we're going to call them on here. So the difference between multifamily and single family in this scenario, there's a few differences. Okay. Why would you want to buy a single family home over a smaller multifamily? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, I think given the opportunity to lease out a single family for my family or a shared property, in any one of those, I would prefer a single family home. All things being equal, I would pay a little bit more for a single family home than I would for a town home or a duplex, because I don't have anybody right next to me. So I think they're just more attractive for the residents. In addition to that, they sell more often. And because they do, they tend to appreciate better. They tend to appraise easier on that appreciation because there's more sales, more comps. And understand, residential loans, sold comps is the only thing that matters. But nothing else really matters. I know that there are technically 3 ways to appraise a property. You have the cost approach, the income approach, and the comparable approach. But after the government got done destroying the appraisal system the way that we've known it forever in 2009, 2010, the other 2 don't exist for residential anymore. I mean, they do, but banks don't use them. So they're basically non-existent. So when you're talking about how do you access or how do you prove that there's been appreciation on your property, that's done by comparable sales. And if there's not very many comparable sales, it can be very difficult to show appreciation on a duplex or fourplex, or it can take longer to show that appreciation, I might say. Where single family home comparable sales, they happen all the time. So it's much, much easier. So there's one big difference in between the 2 of them. Well, I guess that's 2, right? So they're more attractive. In addition to that, single family homes, because of the nature of them selling more often, there are more comparable sales out there. And so you can access the appreciation much, much quicker. I think the pros for the multifamily are pretty easy to understand. You have more doors for potentially the same or at least a per unit lesser price. So the thing I like to tell people is if you have a single family home and it's vacant, your vacancy rate is 100%. If I have a fourplex and I have a vacancy, my vacancy rate is 25%. It's really, really important to keep that in mind. Multiple units, it allows you to scale your unit count faster. And the unit count, the reason why that matters is specifically for vacancies. Because everybody knows it's vacancies and maintenance. Those are the 2 things that really hurt an investment portfolio. So a couple of other things to think about when we're talking about this is that if you have a large amount of money to deploy and you're trying to get the best loan products that you can get, well, the conventional loan products, they are the best that there is out there. They have the best terms. They suck to get because qualifying for them, as anybody who has done it, if you've done it recently, you basically have to give everything except for a DNA sample to them. And it's ridiculous. But if you want to go through all of that, they have a limit to the amount of loans that you can get. And so if you're trying to deploy $1 million, for instance, and you have a limit of 10 loans, well, that's not going to work very well. Because if you're buying $150,000 to $200,000 houses, you're going to hit your limit. However, if you buy a $600,000 to an $800,000 fourplex, now all of a sudden that's 1 loan, but you've invested a substantial more amount of your money, and so you can utilize more expensive properties in that way if you have more money to deploy. Now, if you only have 100,000, it doesn't make any difference, right? Because you can deploy that into single families. You can deploy it into 1 duplex. You can, there's any number of things you could do. But if you're trying to deploy a substantial amount of money into real estate, you need to be looking at larger properties for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is the lending that I just talked about, but also it's easier to manage. You have 4 units with 1 property manager instead of 4 units potentially with 4 different property managers. So you're consolidating your units as well. which makes it easier to manage. So the cons to each one of these, I think we already went over as well, right? It's for single family homes, it's harder to scale and you're 100% vacant if you have a vacancy, right? The cons to the multifamily is they're more expensive and they don't show the appreciation as fast because of the speed of the sales. And the reason for that, guys, most of the people who are buying a fourplex are not buying it to live in, and therefore they're holding it long term, which just reduces the amount of sales. Okay, so it's not. That's the big difference, is that when you're talking about single family homes, the vast majority of single family home sales are not investor sales. They're owner occupant sales. And so, when the only people who are buying and selling properties are investors who typically hold properties for 5 years or more, well, you're just not going to get very many sales. I mean, it's just the way it is, right? So I think the other con to the multifamilies is they're just more expensive. They're not more expensive per unit, but if you don't have a sizable amount of money out of the gate to invest in them, it's much, much more difficult to go and get into them because, you know, for instance, new construction, row home style, fourplex is going to be at a very, very minimum. It's going to be north of $600,000, no matter where you are, just because of the size of the building and the size of the units. So they're considerably more expensive than a single family home. In order to get a comparable single family home, you have reduced your rental pool because the rent rate for a $600,000 house is higher than most people can afford. And so you've chopped your rental pool out. So you shouldn't do that. You should buy, three $200,000 houses or two $300,000 houses rather than buying a $600,000 house. Of course, depending on the market. A $600,000 house where I currently live in Charleston, that's not a very expensive house for, all things being equal. Okay, so those are the pros and cons. Now, the next question that I almost always get from people is, well, Ron, which one do you recommend? I mean, I recommend you use the pros and cons, and I recommend that you choose one that is best for you and for what you're trying to accomplish. And that's part of the reason why at our company, we try not to just sell things. We try to actually talk to people and figure out what it is that they're trying to accomplish so that we can help them understand the pros and cons with respect to their situation. And then ultimately, you're going to make the decision. I've owned all of them, and all of them have done really well, and all of them have done not so great. So I don't think, as far as like maintenance, that kind of stuff, I don't think that vacancy and maintenance makes any difference. I think that's all class of the property related. So if you buy a Class A fourplex, you're going to get the same thing as you would if you bought a Class A house. If you're buying a Class C single family home versus a Class A fourplex, well, they're going to be substantially different. Not because one's a fourplex and the other one's a house, but because you've bought different classes of properties. So I haven't experienced personally that either one of those are better than the other one in any of those areas. It's just a matter of, do you want to buy more units per loan? And do you want to consolidate your units? And do you have the resources to be able to do that? Or do you want faster, quote unquote, faster appreciation, potentially better appreciation because single family homes, people desire them more? Do you want that? Or do you want the pros of the multifamily? That's really it. Both of them are excellent. And we've had both of them appreciate very, very well. So, it just takes a little longer with the multifamily because of the sales. So again, I'm not sure that clears up your decision as you're looking at your decision. whether or not to buy one or the other. But hopefully it gives you a better idea of what the benefits are of each one of those, so that it helps you make that decision. And if you have any other questions about them, feel free to reach out. Invest@rpcinvest.com. Invest@rpcinvest.com. And we've had so many people reach out and say, hey, I'd love for you to talk about this on the show. I'd love for you to talk about that on the show. That has been amazing. So keep doing that. And if you haven't done it yet, you're sitting there going, man, I really wish Ron would talk about XYZ. Invest@rpcinvest.com. And we read all the emails, and we talk about what you guys want on the show. This show really is all about you. So let me know what you need. Let me know what you want. And until next time, get out there and make that happen.
This has been the Get Real Podcast. To subscribe and for more information, including a list of all episodes, go to getrealestatesuccess.com.